gonna tell you, lime is fucking bomb. Root beer is bomb. Like you need to keep it if you have it, if you can, because it's good. And some people might not like it, and cool, then they don't need to. But I want some people to try it, So
Well, and yeah, there's. I mean, I feel like in some ways, when folks have gotten the two main drops have been the root beer freeze and the mean mug,
yeah,
um, right? And when folks have gotten those, like I think that they're just like haven't necessarily hit this like straight root beer thing, and maybe just like pushed it aside, and not spent. I don't know what your take is on that, but I'm surprised I haven't seen more of that out there. And when I first looked at small packs, I didn't see that necessarily until So like we'll talk about the mean mug, for instance. I opened up I think 15, 20 of those, and I saved 3 or 4 females, and I was hunting for this root beer like it was gonna fucking save my life. Like I was gonna find the one that's gonna because those seeds sold for so much. Granted, they were in charity at auction, but I mean, I think one sold for 8, maybe one sold for 10. It was my, you know. So you think you'd want to think that the weed that comes from it is going to just be priceless as well, type thing. And anyways, it wasn't till after the cuts that I had saved on the mean mug. It wasn't till after the second or third generation in cloning and smoking that weed that I was like, God, this is really fucking root beer. And like at first it was like I was like a little bit of tennis ball, a little bit of anise, a little bit of vanilla, but then after the while, and it's like I don't know if the clone had to cook or just kind of settle into itself a little bit and be like, I'm gonna be root beer today. And it's anyways. What's your kind of spin on all that?
I mean, just different grows too, like if you have like if I have a clone, I mean, really any given clone, but I think some things they don't have like a lot of they're not real changeable. They don't have the plasticity that like there's something like diesel or OG. You can see it and go, okay, the best fucking eighth of weed I ever saw in my life is OG. And you could also say the worst eighth of fucking weed I ever saw in my life was OG. It could there's those plants that are like that. I think that's the reason why a lot of the weed that's so popular now is so popular because it's the best weed that comes out the same every time. Like it's not really the same. Don't get me wrong, it can be way better and it can be way worse. But like if you grow like, gelato based stuff, it a lot of times is going to have that similar nose, and it's going to, chunk up and be pretty and look good in the bag. And something like OG can really easily just be like a larfy mess with no resin, with hardly any smell, and all fried looking and shit. Like it can get it's sensitive, The same with sour. Sour you could have a great sour cut and be like, this is not anything near what I want, and grow it 4 times and have the fourth grow be like, oh shit, this is the sour I remember, or OG. Like those things they're like that. And you know, um, did
Oop,
you
I
no?
think we just lost Gene for a sec. I'm going to pause this for a sec. So
Okay.
um, now we're back on. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Little technical difficulty. But I was saying like I think because like the root beer itself has the OG and the sour in it, I think that lends its, makes it so that it has that there's a lot of changes in the phenotype of an individual, where it's like, yeah, you can have it come out this way, or you can have it come out that way. And then there's also a thing to it where I don't know, this is a trippy thing, but like say you have like something like Tangy, right? It's really like every time it's like orange, 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 orange. Like Tangy is orange, and you know that Tangy is orange. But the Tangy I like smells like grapefruit and passion fruit. And the orange ones, I don't like them, you know? But the one, like, there's a sour tangy cut that went around up here that I was just like, that is fire. And it was basically like sour diesel, but it smelled like passion fruit grapefruit. And it was sharp and intense. And I fucking loved that one. And it didn't match the identity of this is tangy. This smells like a tangerine. This smells like an orange, you know? And so there's just an interesting thing, but tangy is a good example of one that you grow from seed and you get them, they smell like orange, right? Now, what's funny about root beer is root beer, when you grow the straight root beer, the seeds like a Backcross 2 or the root beer freeze or whatever. Now, to me, when I smell it, it all smells like root beer, but I'm talking about the plant. So I'm not even smelling it and going, does this smell like soda? Does this smell like this? Does this, to me, I'm like, this smells like the original malm. What I like about the original malm, and they all do. But for somebody who grows them and just wants to get the smell that is quote unquote root beer, the flavor of it, I'm like, I don't even know. The ones that everybody said this smells exactly like root beer, I'm like, yeah, it smells like the original clone. And then the one that somebody says, oh, this one doesn't smell like root beer, I'm like, smells like the original clone. The whole target of the whole breed, to me, they all smell like what I like. And when I roll them up and smoke them, I'm like, this is that shit. This is the weed that I like, right? But because I know the parents going into it and I have the original clone, now it's like when I smell one, I go, oh, this one leans towards the berry side. This leans towards the cola side. This leans here. This leans there. But all of them smell like, to me, what I call jarro. They just all fucking smell like that, you know? So it's an interesting thing. And the same thing happens with the lime. People will grow the lime and they'll be like, this one is lime. This smells like straight cut limes. And then they'll be like, yeah, there's this one. I didn't like this one. This one smells like citronella and eucalyptus. And I'm like, that's the limiest one. But when I say limiest, I mean that flavor identity of that plant that is the lime, not the, you know what I mean? Not
Yeah, yeah.
the little L lime, the big L lime, not the little
Right.
root beer, the big R root beer. The identity, this unique thing. And so it's funny because when you get seeds, you're like, oh, I want it to be like that. When most people are going to get tangy seeds, they're like, I want the orange one. If the one comes out that smells like passion fruit and grapefruit, they'll be like, I really wanted that orange peel. The same with the root beer. You're going to go, oh, I really want the one that smells just like a bottle of root beer soda. And I'm going to be like, well, the original root beer doesn't smell that much like root beer. But what's cool about it is if you look through enough of the root beers, there's root beers that smell exactly like fucking root beer. And you're like, whoa. But it never has, the one thing it doesn't have, and I'd actually like to find it somewhere. Originally, root beer was not made with wintergreen. And when they stopped using, I believe, sassafras they originally used in root
Something
beer.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. And at one point they went, oh, we can't use that. And they stopped using it and they started putting wintergreen in it, which gives root beer a smell and taste to me that's a little reminiscent of toothpaste, which is the part of root beer I don't like. And when you get sarsaparilla soda, you go, oh, it tastes just like root beer. But if you think about it, you go, it's not quite, it doesn't have that wintergreen aspect to it as much. And so it's like I'd kind of like to make root beer from an old ass recipe before they started using wintergreen instead, and see like, okay, does that remind me more? Because there's people who live where where sassafras grows, and they're like, dude, it grows here. And I went out and I found, and they're like, dude, it's exactly like the plant I got out of root beer freeze in the Discord.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit, okay, that's really cool. I don't know what that even smells like. All I know is that when I had this plant, I called it grape headband for a couple of years, and eventually I smelled it and went, fuck, it reminds me of root beer. It smells like root beer. But how much does it really smell exactly like root beer? If originally for a long time I thought it smelled like grape headband,
Right.
right? So like there's definitely a weird thing there with the brain where it's like I tend to not even like to name things after flavors because it's a pet peeve of mine when people say this is such and such. Like, does gelato smell like ice cream? It smells nothing
Right.
like ice cream to me. Cookies doesn't smell like cookies. You know, tangy I bring up because it smells like that. But all the things that people say smell like lemon, they just smell like terpinolene to me, which is totally different. And then the lime, everybody always expects to smell like Chernobyl or Trainwreck. And I'm like, no, it smells like lime. Like there's lime in there. But in all of it, there's always only been a little lime. And the real smell in there is always a bunch of other shit. And that's why I like it. Because if it just smelled like straight lime, I don't know if I'd like it as much. I like the when there's these layers and you sit there and you can pick it apart. And the same thing with the root beer. It has all these different layers. And that's like Nick was looking through it and he was all, dude, I want one that's going to be like, I can't remember what he said, but he wanted one that smelled like vanilla bourbon or something like that. And I was like, you'll find it. You just got to look through enough of them because it's in that range. And that's like with seeds, that's what I really like to do is lock things until it's a sensible range and then not lock them all the way in. Because if you really want that specific thing, you can keep the clone. But I don't want to turn them all into just the one thing because that's where it becomes subjective. And all of a sudden now, like with the root beer, it was Stony, R.I.P., who had a bunch of stuff, and he had root beer ones, and he was like, there is the ones that smell like gas, and I like those, and there's the ones that are sweet, and I don't like those. And I was like, the sweet is what it's all about. Those other ones are the outliers. They're cool and they're great, and if sour is your favorite, then you'll be like, wow, this is a really good version of that kind of gas weed. But like those are the ones where I'm like, yeah, those are a little bit outside the target, but I don't want to get rid of them completely. But I do want it to mostly be in the sweet range. And then once you step inside the sweet range, there's people who are like, I want the berry, and then there's people who are like, I want the cola. And so when it's in there, it's like, well, you won't really know until. And then the trippy thing about smells is that it doesn't matter if the weed is the best. If the smell turns you off, you won't like it. Like Blue Dream, everybody always says, oh, you must not have got the real Blue Dream because the real one's good. And like my buddies from up here, like, no, dude, we had the real Blue Dream and we fucking hate it because they don't like that kind of a smell. And if you don't like the smell, you're not going to like the weed, you know? But I try to not so much go for trying to tell people, like, even when people said, does it really smell like root beer? I'm like, it smells like berry licorice cola. That's what it really smells like. But it still smells like root beer. It also smells like Dr. Pepper. It also smells like Pepsi. It also smells like, cream soda. Sometimes you get the barrier one, and then the dudes up there, Kush Family Originals, they found a killer one, and they described it, and I go, oh, it sounds like raspberry cream soda. And they go, yes, raspberry cream soda. And I was like, call your clone raspberry cream soda. And then they called it raspberry cream soda, and they're like, it's fucking killer. I don't know if they kept running with it, but for a while they had it. And, that's a cool thing to be able to be like, yeah, there's these subtleties that make it a different thing, and they're not all just, that one thing that it is. But that's definitely a trippy thing um, about things from seed in general. And then now you found the one, like you said, and you go, oh, it's this. And now you grow it a second run and you go, it doesn't smell like that. And then you grow it a third run and you go, whoa, it smells way more like that. So, like it takes the time and the energy of like learning the plant, and maybe the plant doesn't like to be, you give it a little bit too much nitrogen and the smell goes flat, or you don't give it quite enough food and then it's like it kind of does a more lackluster thing or whatever, but you gotta grow it a few times and be like, oh shit, okay. My wild strawberry clone was like that. It was a great plant, but it doesn't get very dense and it doesn't yield. It doesn't get big buds. And I kept it anyway because it tastes so damn good. And then I grew it with way more food in the soil one year than I had previously. And this thing throws down. I was like, holy shit. It's like a big giant cookies cherry pie. It was amazing. But I had been thinking that it gets little buds the whole time I had had it. And really,
Right.
no, it gets buds like this. I just hadn't fed it right yet, you know? And that took me years. It's like goofing around, you know?
So, um, going from the root beer cut you guys found, um, you had there was issues with that. You brought it indoor and it would hurt me. You know, you still
No,
hold the cut?
yeah, I hold the cut. The root beer mom actually didn't ever herm indoor. It's
Okay.
still it still has never hermed indoor. I got it to herm outdoor on a plant where I had it in a 7 gallon pot as a full term plant. So imagine like you come out in May and put clones into 7 gallon pots and you leave it there till October. It's like the most unhealthy thing you
Right.
could ever do to a plant. It's just till it's, 8 foot tall or 7 foot tall in a 7 gallon pot. And the pot, 7 gallon pot's not even all the way full. And it's just, and I got it to get a couple nuts on one or two of those plants. And then I had just kept them around because I was like, I can hit them with some mail. And then as soon as they did that, I was like, well, sorry, we can't do this. I was going to do a collab with somebody with it. So I killed them off. But it didn't ever herm indoor. What would happen was when I would make seeds with it, the people who grew them indoor had issues where um, the initial ones that I had people test, it was like every plant was intersex. And I was like, damn, because I grew them outside and they were really good. So I was like, well, there's certain things that are just like intersex. They really are. Like when they grow, like I've grown some Swazis and back in the day we grew some Thai. And when you grow it, it's like the plants are just they're intersex. They just do it. It has nothing to do with environment. They are plants that are producing, which is in the history of cannabis and evolution. That's where it started from. They were originally like that, and we've let them apart from that through a lot of work. But what's uh, what's trippy was these were like, fully stable, never like, for a different example, cherry limeade. When I would do cherry limeade, it was like I would grow it outdoor and some of them would be hermy outdoor, some of them wouldn't be, and I was able to lead it away to the point where now I have them at the point where they don't even want to be hermy indoor by just breeding and selecting properly, right? But the root beer was a trip because you grow it outdoor and they're fine, and then you grow them indoor and they're all hermy. The cherry limeade was like you would grow them outdoor and a couple would herm, and you would grow them indoor and a little bit more of them would herm. But the root beer seed would be like you'd grow it outdoors, zero herms. You'd grow it indoor, 100% herms. So it was like weird. This is a weird, different, obviously operating on different genes. It's a different gene affecting it. And in cannabis, there's in a lot of things, it's like there's the sex chromosome. But with cannabis, it's like no, there's other things going on that are affecting the sex and making it do different things as well. It's a really weird plant that way. But then I made the Backcross 2 seeds, and I was like, all right, well, hopefully the selection went a little differently. And because the root beer hadn't hermed indoor, I was like, well, if I backcross to it enough times, I could probably get it away from wanting to herm. The reality, though, was that even though the root beer mom didn't herm when it was grown indoor, if I had grown it from seed indoor, it might have hermed. And I think probably Sour Diesel and OG probably hermed from seed indoor before they were cloned. Then everyone gets the clones and goes, oh no, they're fine. And then occasionally they herm, but probably the seed plants hermed originally.
And then
And
once
so,
again, once they get cloned out, they kind of chill out and
and I think
stabilize.
that's the case probably with would have been a lot of like the root beer backcross one. A lot of them would have probably cloned away from it once they get used to being indoor, you know. Also, they were only grown by a couple growers, and you know, if you push things hard and there's, you know, you overwater jarros in general, they get really unhappy. They don't usually herm from it outdoor, but they definitely are sensitive to overwatering. And anything that causes stress is, you know, something that's likely to trigger things, even if it's not what you would consider stress. You know, like, oh, I just kept them real moist. Like, yeah, well, they're fucking overwatered. They're pissed at you, you know? But then I ended up doing, the root beer backcross twos.
Well,
And
hold on. What did you outcross in originally to make them
oh, so
so
the
hard?
original one was made with the jarro. So basically,
Okay.
what it was the jarro was when I took that, you know, that year I took the OG coffee male and I put it on a couple things. I put it on candelabra, that wound up going on cherry and cherry again to make cherry west. I put it on sour diesel, that made jarro. I put it on headband, that made root beer, right?
Okay.
So the headband and the sour diesel were very similar, you know, similar plant, similar weed. The headband I liked more. The sour, though, I liked for, you know, it was sour. Fucking people love it. It's great weed. Um, if I had the headband and the sour side by side now, I might like the sour better because I like that more upbeat high that's more clear and kind of just zings you really hard for a rush at first. The headband really just like slapped you and you were just so high and you were high for a long time, you know? And it's like not, it's not social or bright. It's just like, fuck, I'm really fucking high, you know. You just are it's the kind where you sit around and you keep telling yourself, fuck, I'm really stoned, and you're sitting there like, fuck, stoned, man, you know. Like in Blow, and the dude's like, I'm fucking stoned, like that's just how it is, you know. Whereas the sour diesel is more like you smoke and you go, yeah, I'm really high, and then you're all, okay, cool, whatever, you know. It's like you can kind of brush off the sour high, in my opinion. um but so what I did was I took the my favorite males from the sour cross OG coffee, which is Jarro, and I took three males out of that, out of the F1, and I mixed the pollen and I put that on all of my favorite, um, not even my favorite, I put it on all the females. So I had large plants and I seeded the back sides of them on like 6 branches apiece. That used to be kind of my routine, just seed a couple on everything in case something comes out really good. And so I did that. And then I also did the headbands with that male. I did the sours, I did the sour cross, the Jarro, and I did the headband cross. And my favorite of the headband cross was the number 2. That was the root beer clone. And so after I had it cloned, I already had the seeds. So I had seeds from the seed plant, and then I had the clone. So all I had to do was pop some of those seeds, and I went, well, fuck it. I like the clone. I'm going to put it back on it. So I put it back onto it, and then that was the initial back cross. And then, you know, those ones I grew, I loved them. And then um, I ended up giving my mom the Jarro F2 seeds, and I gave her the root beer cross Jarro seeds. No, the not the root beer cross Jarro, the root beer cross Jarro, right? The back cross seeds. And so then, and at that point, I probably gave her the Jarro F3s, not the F2s, because this is the year in between when I make the F3s back cross. And so she asked me if I wanted the males back of any of the stuff, and I go, no, you can kill them all. And then I was like, let me see your males of the. So I was like, I could make a back cross too. That would be fun, right? So I was like, let me see the males of the root beer back cross ones, and what she called, I think, skinny Jarro, because there was fat Jarro was the sour one, came from this plant. The root beer, you know, it gets the more spaced, little narrower buds. It gets substantial, but the other one was like this big fat OG coffee buds, you know.
Right,
And
right.
so those ones, she called that fat jarro and then skinny jarro. But the skinny jarro was root beer back cross. And so I got those back and I looked, and one of them was like the original brother of the root beer that I had killed. I had looked at it and gone, that one looks a lot like this one female, and it's got the wide branching and it's more thin and it's kind of more headbandy. And I was like, I don't want to really bank on that male since it's going to be real similar. I want to use the more sturdy. I like the sturdiness of the sour diesel cross more than this viney headband male like this. So I'm going to kill this, and I'm going to keep the those ones. So then when I see these males my mom has, I go, I already knew that the plant that had wound up being my favorite was the one that looked like that male I had killed. And I go, hey, there's the plant that looks like that male again. So I smelled it, and it had more like the Blue Bull root beer mix smell, where the plant was loud. The plant smelled like the root beer bud. The root beer plant smells like a diesel plant. It doesn't, you got to really know it really well to smell it in veg and go, okay, I can smell a little bit of where that crosses over. But it's not one of those ones that translates heavy. So I was like, okay, so here's a male that really smells like it. So I'm gonna bet my money that this thing is gonna carry a lot of those terps, because the whole plant smells like the bud from the one that smells like that, where the plant don't smell hardly like shit. So I wound up using that one to make the root beer back cross twos. So then when I grew the root beer back cross twos, I was like, oh yeah, because the root beer back cross one, there was still a lot that weren't as like root beery and sweet. They were more jarro-y. So then when it went back, and because of not only did it's like, oh, just back cross twice. And no, I didn't just back cross twice. When I did the second back cross, I picked a plant that was going to lean it way in the direction that I wanted, right? It was already more root beer than root beer. So now when I put it with root beer, I figured, okay, this should be pretty cool, you know? So then when I grew those, they came out really, really nice. So what I ended up doing was, out of those seeds, I grew them, and I ended up getting this one plant that was really, really exceptional. It budded a little before the other ones, and the resin came on really, really fast, and it had a really loud, sweet root beer smell. It smelled like the root beer, but more. But it was still the same kind of character to it, but it had like this chocolate Coke smell to it, you know? And it was so nice that before it ever finished, I said, fuck it. I cut the top chunk off of it, like, you know, top bud with the little branches on it, and I left the bottom of the plant, and I took it and I stuck it back under lights when it probably had like 2.5 weeks to finish or something. It wasn't done, but it was already really good weed. So I was like, at least I'll be able to try the weed if it's good early. I don't want to miss this fucking plant because it was so nice, you know? So I took that plant and I kept it, and I didn't seed any of those. No, I did seed some of those, but I seeded them very lightly, and I didn't really do much with any of those seeds. I gave them to a few people, did a few different things with that as far as like letting other people grow them and everything. But then I went ahead, and once I had found that one, I was like, I really like this one, and that was the one that I called the Coca-Cola. And that was a root beer backcross 2 plant. So then what I did was I went, okay, I'm going to see if I can get something cool if I go ahead and pop 100 of these. So I popped 100 more of the same seed that the Coca-Cola clone came out of. And I went through them, and the Coca-Cola has a very distinctive look. It has leaves that are way more jagged and saw bladed than all the rest, and none of the other ones look like that I've ever seen. But when I popped 100, I found one more plant that looked like it. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be similar. But it turned out to be a male. So looking at that, I went, okay, shit. And I smelled it. And I went, okay, this has the smell that's very similar to the clone, which I have right here. I can smell her. I can smell it. It has the same look. It's a very rare look. It was 1 out of 100, right? Maybe it would have been five. Maybe it would have been 35 out of 1,000, but you don't know because 100, statistics-wise, with plants, as you know, is still fairly small. You can't really see a huge overlying trend, but we know it's not that common if it's only 1 in 100. It at least is pretty fucking rare. So I took those and I paired them up. That is root beer freeze. I also found a male that wasn't that type, that was the twin plant out of 100, that was like the original root beer mom. And I used that to make root beer Backcross 3. Root beer Backcross 3, when I tested it indoors with people, giving it to people to see if it's stable, they were like, nah, it's like 35% of them herm, right? But the one that was the cocoa as the mom instead of the root beer as the mom, that one, when I gave it to people, those ones didn't hurt when they were grown indoor. And so those were grown by a few people in decent numbers indoor, to the point where I was like, well, shit, if there were 50 or 60 females or whatever and they didn't herm indoor, and normally they all herm, I was like, all right, these seem like they're doing pretty good. And then my buddy grew a whole field of them, and I got to see them like really in action, as far as what they really do, and smell every plant, go through, be able to smell whatever he had, 150 females or something. And I was just like, holy shit, these are really nice. And so after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and drop these. Everybody wants root beer seeds. I'm going to drop them for cheap. They're all going to be over a pack and a half. That's like, people are like, oh yeah, it's fucking bitching about whatever it's taxing on it. I'm like, no, they're basically like, they like cost a little more than a Bodhi pack, less than a TGA pack, and there's like 17, 18 seeds in most of the packs. So the people who actually got them and got a lot, it's like, I just saw a dude, he's like, yeah, I'm popping 4 packs, 69 seeds. I'm like,
Yeah,
I mean, not
totally.
that bad. So I put them out like that, and it as expected, and that's why I always like to be transparent. I'm like, root beer stuff historically herms. These can be grown and not herm. I know it for a fact because there's been several grows indoor with no herms. The statistics say that there should have been some in there, right? And then you look at the basically the previous ones, where it's like they're just all over the place. And the people who have had the instability from the root beer, it tends to be where it's like, okay, there's 5 females, and the 5 females, they all herm. And I'm like, well, when you look at statistics, you go, it's environment. And then people go, well, my grow is good. And I'm like, I'm not saying your grow's bad. That doesn't mean that you're growing bad. It means that there's a plant that has a potential to grow good, like sour diesel or OG Kush. And if you grow it and it doesn't like something, it herms. My buddy across the road, he has the big beautiful Conleys greenhouses with the fans are like as big as my house. The fucking all the rolling benches, the lights, everything's beautiful. Best setup he's ever had. Before that, he always ran hoops that were being hand pulled with golden arms and shit. Always killed it, done really good. Grown the same OG cut since like the end of the 90s, right? Puts it in the best setup he's ever had, with everything completely dialed, the best ever. Herms is shit. Same cut. You know what I mean? So like, was it environment? Yes. Was it a bad environment? No. What the fuck was wrong? I don't know. He does it again. He didn't even have a problem. He didn't change shit. Same clone. He wanted to grow the same OG. So it's one of those trippy things when you have those plants that are like that. And like, would I like it to be perfect? Yeah, but eventually, will it be? Will you get it dialed in? Will I get it dialed in? Sure, maybe. But there's a lot more chance that somebody's going to get it dialed in and have a perfect version of it if everybody can get cheap packs of it and look through them and find the best parents and be able to do it versus me just going, it's my favorite weed ever. It grows perfect for me, but somebody's going to have an issue. I'm like, somebody's going to have an issue. You know, it happens. You want some more seeds. You want like something that's easy to grow, that's not finicky. I have those. They exist. It's not going to be this weed. It's, if you want this weed, you're going to have to fuck around with it and figure out how to grow it. Just like when you finally get your hands on a sour diesel cut. Just like when everyone finally got their hands on a cookies cut or an OG cut. It's like, you're not just going to have fucking, it's not hamburger helper. You're going to have to, you might have to fucking figure out how to make something that's a little trickier to make. It's a little trickier to make, you know? But that's the reason why I finally settled on going, okay, the root beer freeze is one that I'll actually put out. The same deal with the mean mug. The mean mug has showed some intersex for some people, but so does the GMO clone. The GMO clone is in huge production. Everybody loves it. It's a great breeder, but nobody can tell me that they've never seen it herm out. But mostly you've never seen it herm out. But GMO has hermed in rooms where root beer and where root beer seeds didn't herm. So then you're like, well, if you got the mean mug from seed and you got the GMO growing and the GMO's herming, then like, you know, there's always this false equivalency where people are like, oh, it's if it hermed on me, then it's garbage. And I'm like, you know, well, say that about all the most famous clones that are all the best thing. The list of the all-time greats, the Mount Rushmore of cannabis, has hermed on everybody. All of them. Yeah. Down to my old favorite Northern Lights. That one hermed, you know. So, you know, there's that thing. But that's what's cool is you're running through them all. And when you have cuts that you worked and you pulled out, you're like, okay, this is going to be, you can bet it's more stable than GMO. It's more stable than sour diesel, more stable and proven and vetted than these famous cuts that people grow millions of pounds of weed off of, and it's not seeded and it didn't herm, you know. Then it's like, okay, well, here's this really tricky thing to grow for some people. For some reason, for some people, it's not tricky at all. No big deal. Private breeds gave him root beer freeze. He's one of the people who grew it indoor. Boom, pops them. Finds a perfect root beer, full-on root beer, terps, blind, show it to people. Whoa, that's weird. That smells like root beer. Yeah, this is root beer freeze, right? No herms, no issues. Like, for some people, things work better than they do for other people. But it also ain't a $500 pack of seeds, not an $800 pack of seeds and whatever it is. But then for the people who want it and, you know, are worried about those things, that's where it's like, look, the clone, get the clone from Dutch. Like, he's seen thousands of these plants. He knows this is the good one. This one, you know, so like, you know, not to try to pump up your clone too much, but like, it's the reality of it is that these are challenging gene pools. And when someone has, well, like if someone has a sour and they tell you it'll never drop nuts, I'm like, I'd like to have that one, you know, because yeah, sour diesel is hard to grow without it getting a couple nuts. You got to watch it, you know. So
it's cool to hear about. I haven't heard you describe with the sawtooth blade and narrowing that down in the Coca-Cola, because that's, you know. So I kind of did a similar thing where when I got the root beer freeze, I thought, well, I'm gonna open pollinate them. I know, like that's what you do when you really want to find something cool, like, right? And so I open pollinated them, and what I did was create another generation of shit to sort through, and most of them, I would say 90% hermed, you know. And to be fair, I brought them from outside to inside, you know. And so like I was fucking, there was some fuckery, but the ones that didn't herm were again that blue bull flavor. And so it was like kind of set in stone that that's the one to go after. This is the one that doesn't herm for me. And then when I opened up the seeds from that one, that's where I found this overwhelming Dr. Pepper. You know, like when Nick had pulled Dr. Pepper out of the F2s, this was the you know, the fucking artificial juice flavor of the thing. You know, just amped up, and And so that was really cool. And then when I was able to hunt them in the greenhouse, so what I did there is I just said, okay, this one I really like the cutting, and I hadn't saved the cuttings. I'm going to keep all the seeds from this, and I'm going to call that this thing. I was just trying to find a way to categorize, and I'm going to call it Dr. Prune Pop. And I have the ones that are blueberry from the blueberry plant. I'm going to call those this, and then I have the ones over here. And so when I opened up all that population in the greenhouse, it was all predominantly like you'd go across and you go, oh, it's a lot of blueberry, dude. That was really at least a third of every flavor profile. And then so I kind of pushed those aside, and I was like, I had to really push myself to say, is the blueberry pile of seeds, the ones I labeled blueberry, actually the most blueberry? Is that still the best version of blueberry? And sure enough, at the end of the day, I said yes, and I found 3 or 4 that I narrowed it down to in there before I made my final selection. But then same thing when I'd go through the prune, or the cola, it was like there's a handful of them that are that, and which ones are the ones that have that profile. You'd be like, oh, this one's a little more sweet cola, this one's a little more spicy, and you just try. This one's got a little more vanilla, driving your fucking head crazy, going, what is real? And one of the cool things that I do for good or worse is I re-veg in my greenhouse so I get to cut the plants down, and I leave the bottom third, and they're still in the living soil, and I just flip the lights. That's the only thing that happens. So I get really high percentage of re-veg, but I also gives me time to process, smoke, make hash. In that 4 weeks while they're re-vegging, I can do all that shit, and then I go back to them and go, okay, well, and then I smell it again, and the one's like, oh man, they're all beat up now, and they're still smelling, and then I have someone come in to buy some material to maybe make some hash. I'm like, what do you think about this one? And they're like, look at it. I'm like, just smell it. And they're like, god damn, dude. And so like all that process helps me go, this is the loudest version of this profile, and also subsequently through that process past the indoor, the no herming, the outdoor full term, the hash shield. It just kind of passed all these tests, and now I'm fucking 2 years into working on some dude's signature strain.
No, but that's what's funny though, is that like that's one of the ones that has a life of its own. Like I love it because I love how, like, when I take those things and stick them in 7-gallon pots and grow a little plant, the amount of weed that is on it, that's all so perfect. And like, even or as like a really big plant, they're just like such good plants that like originally I just kept it because I liked mechanically how the plant was. I was like, I don't know if the weed's good, but like, the morphology on this thing and everything about how it does its thing, I'm like, I could make a good plant with this even if I have to add good weed to the mix because the plant's so good. And then it turned out like it was also really, really good weed. Um, but like what's funny about the way that I do stuff is like, I have a bunch of seeds in the fridge. Like, I don't know when the next time I'm going to pop any root beer shit is. Everybody went crazy over, I'm like, here is a bunch of stuff, grow it, smoke it, herm it, party with it, do whatever the hell you're going to do with it. And then, like, it's there, at least it's out there. And I don't have to have a million people going, hitting me up, going, dude, what's up with root beer? When's the root beer? When's the root beer? I'm like, that's great. I love to have the interest in it and stuff, but I don't like do any of my work really as being like this, like I'm going to have this one, like you think DJ Short, you think Blueberry, you think like there's different people who that's their weed. Like for me, funny enough, like for me, like that's lime. Lime is the one that I'm like, oh, I really want to, everything you're doing with the root beer. I'm like, with the lime, I'm like sitting here doing that. I have all these things of all these Backcross 2s, these big bags of them in the fridge, and there's all these different lines, and I want to go through them all. And I'm like, that could probably be my whole life. I could just be like make limes in different lines and make them pure and do outcrosses with other things to make cool stuff, and then just be like, yeah, I don't really need any other stuff. But I don't tend to breed like that, because as soon as I see a plant and I'm really interested in it and I know that nobody's really doing anything with it, or they're not doing what I want to do with it, then I'm like, okay, shit, okay. And I just like go on this thing, and it's all a total mania, and I shouldn't do it, because I should be like, over the years, I'm always like, dude, Pina, grape soda skunk, Jarro, lime, cherry limeade, and don't touch anybody else's shit, and do these things and refine them and
The
have a
rainbow.
menu where you offer these things pure for the rest of your life in their finest form that you can keep them being made at, and maybe even clone parents and just have them being produced like that, and then maybe do some little one-off shit. But every time I grow a bunch of stuff, I'm like, oh, this one's neat. What's up with this? Ooh, I scored this one, this old pack, and now I'm gonna do all this stuff. And it's so hard for me to like focus and just do like what I know would be a great like business plan and like a company thing. I'm just always like just a plant nerd that wants to grow this other thing. And like Bodie gave me watermelon, that watermelon hash plant Nepalese or whatever, and I just like look at that and I'm like, ooh, like where can I go with this? I really wanted it. And then I see a couple other people working with it, and I'm like, I'm not even gonna pop it right now. I'll save it, because I know people are doing things with it and everything. But like, yeah, like as far as it's just super funny, because at a point people are like, oh, that Mean Gene, he's the one that bred root beer, that's his thing. I'm like, I mean, it's a plant that I kept. I love it. It's my favorite weed, but it wouldn't even been a front runner for what I would think everybody else would like. It's just what I like. And because I like it so much, I joked it up so much, like, this is the shit, this is the shit. And then it like turned into this thing where everybody wanted it so much. And I think it is
It
of what
is
I
the shit.
discovered.
It is the
Good,
shit, bro.
dude.
Like
It's
it's
really fucking good.
it's the smoke is there, like the lasting want to keep smoking it.
Yeah.
It has the bag appeal. It has the vigor, to match with any other plant that has vigor. It's fairly easy to process, and I think it's versatile in moving the flavors around if you want to breed with it.
It's yeah. I mean, it's really an incredible plant, an incredible little gene pool. Not to like downplay it as not being the best shit I have. Maybe it is the best shit I have. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, still root beer and lime and Jarro and root beer, I consider to be kind of in the same thing, right?
Sure.
But like, I not to like say that it's not like the best I have, or that I don't think it's like top tier. And I think it's novel. I don't think that anybody else's stuff is quite what it is. People are like, oh, well, I got root beer here. Like, it's probably not the same weed. You haven't seen it. If you see it, you might realize like this is this and that's that. They're different things, right? But like, just to say that like my breeding style is not at all to be like, okay, here's the best thing that is my favorite, and now I'm just going to focus on that. I just can't do it. Like,
You're not gonna dress all in root beer and have a root beer car and
yeah, or even like, I mean, like, shit, that stuff's all great. Like, that would be, all that stuff would be hilarious, dude. Get the full velour printed root beer bottle cap suit and just like do like straight clown shit with it. It would be hella fun, dude. I have nothing against
the
it.
bear with the white belly,
You're right.
the
But
W bear.
yeah, but like, it's just that once I get things to a point where I know that they're really good, like, I have so many other things that I'm like, I really want to do something with this. For me, now for other people, maybe it needs to be refined further. If this person grows it and it doesn't work in their grow, you know, whatever. It's a very mixed bag. But a lot of these people who got it, it's just their favorite thing. It works perfectly in their grow. They don't understand why I say that it has instability, because they've grown a bunch of them. It's never shown. You grow them, you've seen a bunch of instability. I grow them. I haven't seen it outdoor, but in my dep, when I grew the root beer backcross twos, I had a whole bunch of them. There was like, they all had like one nut on like all the plants. Like, but that was also, I had LEDs running in my mom hoop, and I was covering in the evening and uncovering once it got dark. And my lights were just shining on my fucking plants all night. And like, I was like, it took me all the way till I realized it. I was like, oh shit, this is not going to work. These things are, so, I mean, I probably harmed a big percentage of plants that wouldn't have harmed.
Or you just realize the lights are coming on at the wrong time.
Yeah, I just, well, they were just running.
Yeah.
But anyway, I fucked that off. But I knew I did, and I know a lot of people who have, like you said, you're like, oh, I took them from outdoor and I brought them indoor. Well, like, what was the light cycle outdoor? What was the light cycle indoor? What was your swing of all of what they're, you know, it's just like the human body, the plant there, we're like computers constantly measuring everything and making sure it works, you know, and you like give people like hard drugs and they get all skinny from it and shit, and the body adjusts, and then they quit, and all of a sudden they just fucking balloon up because their body's like, oh, my metabolism needs to be like this. Plants are doing the same shit all the time, you know. But yeah, it's just one of those things where, for me, at the point that it's at, like, I could open pollinate root beer freeze and root beer backcross 3 and have that gene pool for myself. It'll do everything I want it to do. I can fill my gardens full of that. I can grow rows of them. I could make bulk hash from fields of that shit right now, and I'm sure I would probably average out at fucking 4 or 5% you know, return on it or something, growing it as field weed or something. Like, I really like it. But you know, that's why it's like, then at this point, when you take it and you start dissecting it and going, oh, this, that, I want this, I want that, you know, like, that's what I'm doing with the lime, because the lime has these things I like so much more than others. With the root beer, you give me the worst plant out of the whole thing and I roll a joint and I'm going to go, oh, fuck, that's that jarro. That's that root beer. That's that big R root beer, you know, as opposed to where if you go through, you know, 20 of them or something, you can find the little R root beer, where it's like, this is root beer, the drink, like, here it is, you know.
Right.
So I'm stoked that you're working with it, because that's what I'd like to see done with anything I ever put out. I'd love to talk to somebody. I knew a dude here who had this sweet tooth, and it was the first year I had animal cookies, and I showed him my weed, and he's all, whoa, what's this? And I was all, this is cookies. And he's all, here, check this out. This is sweet tooth. And it was like just as resinous and dense and gnarly. And I was like, fuck, it don't get much gooier than that, huh? And he's like, yeah, it's a sweet tooth. I've been working on it for 18 years. And I'm like, fuck, originally that was a thing that was put out. It was released, but you don't see it available everywhere. And his version of it, I don't know how different it was than if I would have had a lot of the originals. That's why I say I got these old ones. I want to pop them and look through and see if I find something like his, because like, when people put things out, you don't really know what's in them and what could be there, and like, you need people to explore them. So I always hope I hear back from somebody and they're like, dude, I took lime sour and I worked it to the point where it's the most sour weed you've ever smelled, but it has a bright lime peel on it. And I'd be like, fuck, dude, it's like that. They're all true breeding now. Like, give me some seeds. I want them. You know, I want to work with them. Like, and I don't even, at that point, I don't even assume people will share them back with me. Like, hey, I bought them. I did all this work. I don't want to give them to you so you can knock off your knockoff. But like, you know, I hope that's how it goes. And to be honest, as long as I know they did it, I don't really need to fucking grow it anyway. I got plenty of stuff to grow, plenty of stuff to have. To know that somebody accomplished that and pulled it off, I'm happy that like it went, and like, I can see the big picture. I just can already picture I'm dead and gone and the weed's still around, and I'm hoping that like some of this shit made it, and not for the point of legacy or for any of that, but because weed is like one of the most valuable things we can inherit from previous generations and pass to future generations, even if it's nameless and there's no credit and there's no nothing. It's like there needs to be weed that's so good that everybody wants to keep it. And preservation is a lot easier when the shit's really good. When it's really good, people naturally just fucking want to keep it. So when you're doing this work like that, making these improvements, anything that you are improving, I know you're already going to be improving mold resistance. For me, I will never see a spot of mold on root beer here because my weather is the way it is. But now push it up into Washington. Holy shit, now you're going to find the ones that I can't even find.
And they were good. Like I would say 85, 90% were solid,
Yeah.
So those are obviously the ones that I selected towards, but there were a couple that just didn't make it,
I would have never known. I would have just been looking at it going, okay, so now that's work that you're doing. That's work that I can't do. The only way that I could do that was sit there and try to just hose them down twice a day all the time. And then it's like, then if they all rot, then what is I'm not really learning anything,
Right.
like it's
extreme. You learn that if you hose down your weed, you kill it.
You're learning that that's just something nothing can survive. So it's like, well, fuck, that's like, oh yeah, well, let's see which one of these guys can survive being held underwater for 30 days. Like none of them. That you're not going to teach you who holds their breath the longest. You know what I mean?
Right.
But by moving it up into Washington, we do get to learn who can hold their breath the longest. Because you go, oh, it's just the right amount of pressure to be able to weed out what is no good and be able to keep what is actually practical. So naturally, your populations are going to go a cool direction. And then you're going to say, you're going to go with preference and all this. That's an objective thing, mold resistance or whatever. But then there's the subjective aspect of you going, look, I did this and I got this flavor, and then you isolate that. And then at the same time going, and then among them, I found which one yielded the most hash. And among the ones that yielded the highest amount of hash, which ones of it were faking the funk and they had a lot, but it wasn't quite as quality, and where the happy medium is on quantity, quality, resistance, hardiness, fast growth, flowering time, all this shit is stuff that you're doing that is going above and beyond me when I just go, dude, I love to smoke this shit and I love how the plant grows and they're all good enough for me. Now you're going, yeah, that's cool, but I'm gonna be like looking at this one part of it, and I also am gonna have an emotional attachment over the years of nostalgia and shit where you're gonna get it and you're gonna go, huh, I don't know. I don't see how they're all the same. They're not.
Once I threw off the root beer drink, goals,
yeah,
right? Because like that, and decided to go to the blueberry, which is not something I go towards. Like I'm not. It's weird. I'm drinking carbonated water with cherry flavor in it, but that's not usually. I usually like bitter and savory and type things, but it was just so overwhelming. I couldn't. You can't not say that's the loudest goddamn one.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to finding the prune and the cola flavors and kind of separating them out. Like I still can't decide between those three. That's why I haven't. Like like naturally, from a sales perspective, it's too fucking confusing to say. There's one that's sweet cola, there's one that's blueberry, and then there's one that's prune. Well, what the fuck's the prune? And what like those are pretty. I don't know. They're pretty similar when you're smelling them all. It might sound a little weird if you're not smelling them together, but you can realize that because you've gone through the population, obviously. But
and I
just can't decide, dude. I'm just like, God, man, this one is just a little bit this, and this cheese is this one, and this one's cheese is that. I don't know. Like, I can't choose.
Yeah, that's why they're all, to me, I'm like, they're all they just all do what I want them to do. And I know you've noticed too, over having a lot of them, that like all of them smoke good and all of them have a high that is distinct to that type of weed. There's little bit of variations. One might be a little more sleepy, one might be a little bit more up, but they basically all do this thing where when you smoke them, it's like sour diesel. You smoked that shit right away. And then like they also do a trippy thing where if people don't have like a huge tolerance to the point where they're just totally fucking washed out with weed, and weed doesn't have any character of high anymore, you know? Like if you have any ability to notice the difference between like fairly sativa and fairly indica, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like anybody can tell the difference between like Bubba Kush and Haze, right? But if you're one of the people who can tell the difference, if you have a Bubba Kush Haze cross and you're like, huh, this one's a little more sativa, this one's a little more indica. If you still, you know, you have some bearings of what a high is like, you notice that those ones have a high that is like very bright and open, and like you feel like kind of good and improved, and it doesn't sap your energy, but it does kind of chill you out, and it's a little bit confusing in a fun way, in that sativa way, where you're like, oh shit, I kind of didn't like you probably shouldn't smoke a shitload of Jarro and fucking do something that's like ultra high risk, you know? Where there's some weed where you're like, yeah, I can get away with doing this and this is cool. I'm
Yeah,
stoned all the time, but it's just enough of that little sativa-iness.
I can do
Like
this.
yeah, I relate to, I had one time when I was smoking um A5 haze, and I had I had one, my older son said something, and my younger son was walking with me, and we walked over to like this building, and all of a sudden I heard my older son saying something about my younger son, and I was like, looked over and I saw the ladder, and I went, oh fuck, did my younger son fall off the ladder? I was like, oh shit. And I went running over there. And my older son was like holding the lighter, and he's like, hey, he was fucking with the lighter, you know? And I was like, oh, okay. And then I like look and I think about it and I go, my younger son was standing right next to me. And I knew that. But I was so fucking high that I was like paranoid that something had, when I heard a loud, and I have kind of bad like response to that shit, like PTSD, you know what I mean? Like if I hear like a loud noise, I'm like, oh shit, shit hit the fan, you know? Like I just kind of do that to a certain extent just from having weird experiences and shit. But I'm like, dude, he's standing right here with me. And I hear this and I see a ladder and I go, did my kid fall off the ladder? And I'm like that. And I sat there for a second and I went, that's fucking strong weed right there. That's fucking high. Cause I had just been sitting there like, I'm like this, I don't believe it. Everybody says it's so fucking potent and blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't look like shit. It doesn't taste like much. You know, it's pretty good. You know, it's cool. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm fucking high. Like dissociative, you know, where you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's not just like that's not like smoking a runts joint. You smoke a runts joint, like you'll be like, yeah, I'm high. It's good. You're high. You might have even a touch of that kind of shit. I remember my buddy almost ran through a red light when we were down in Santa Rosa. The first time we smoked some really, really well grown white runts, you know, it was like, oh shit. And he doesn't do shit like that. I was like, oh, we didn't even think we were stoned, but now, yeah, you just almost ran that red light, bro. We're fucking high, you know? But this was that times 50. And I was like, okay, you know, but I won't get a lot of that with the root beer stuff, but I'll get a little touch of it just
Just
to
a little bit where you're
make
like
things fun.
watering and you're like, okay, I got to grab this. And you walk over to grab it and you're like, what the fuck was going on all together right
Yeah,
now? It takes you a
yeah,
couple 30 seconds. You're like, oh yeah, I
yeah,
was watering, and then I was watering, and I had to do, fuck, I gotta
yeah,
walk over there. Oh yeah, I needed the fucking
yeah,
adapter for the water fixture. Yeah,
yeah. And it'll make it a little bit harder to do like cooperative stuff where there's a lot of moving pieces, and you're over, you know, like I was at my buddy's and we were doing some farm work in his farm, and we were like doing, and it's like moving this and then moving that, and then like he's doing this, doing that. And then I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, fuck, which part of this was I supposed to be doing? You know? And then I'm like, okay, cool, I got it back. But like normally I'm just like, oh, boom, boom, okay, I know what we're doing. But there's just that little bit of a disconnect there that makes it like fun to smoke with people because like funny things happen and people say dumb shit and they don't realize. And then you're like, everybody, oh, dude, you fucking, and you're like, okay,
You
this is
said that
good,
out loud.
good weed, you know, like fun weed. Where some weed's not really fun. You just smoke it and you're like, okay, I'm hella high now, and I don't, you know, I like it's good. It's good if you need it. It's good medicine. Like if you
Right.
need to go into that state where you're just like, okay, I just need to like fucking like nighttime medicine. Like the difference between daytime cold medicine and nighttime cold medicine. The root beer is daytime cold medicine. You know, it ain't. It's not the shit that you smoke just to get like doled down. It's like definitely makes it's an experience enhancer. It's like, oh, you watched that movie, dude, watch it on this weed.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
oh, the shit, that was really good. I didn't realize how good that was.
Put on some good tunes and water, and you're just like
Yeah.
fucking playing guitar with the
Yeah, get you in the zone, you know. It's that kind of weed, and that's why that's what's made lime and root beer be my favorites, is that they always are like an experience improver. And a lot of weed, it doesn't do that for me. It makes me, you know, maybe kind of dull. And that is cool for certain, like I said, that's cool. That's cool nighttime medicine. Cherry limeade is like very warm and comforting and nice and great, but it also kind of makes you kind of like, you know, like gives you a little bit of a mini lobotomy. Whereas all the root beer stuff, it does, you know, it's like the come on of the sour, but then with a lasting high that's like warmly psychedelic in a sense. And then, you know, if you smoke way too much weed all the time, then when you smoke it, you'll almost think it's not that potent because it'll make you feel almost a little less high than you were before you smoked it,
I
you
can
know,
see that.
because of the brightness. But
Yeah,
it's also
and that's
cool.
probably where I first started to realize, because I do smoke a lot of weed, but it's
Yeah.
like, you know, oh, I'm just feeling a little bit more. Shoulders are down, like, man, it's nice out. You know, it was just kind of, and then I started to think about it, and you know, smoke it in the morning
Yeah.
first thing, and that's when I can really notice is when I smoke something in the morning.
That's the trick. That's the funny thing about tolerance too, was like I basically never skipped a day of smoking weed between the time I was 14 and 30 years old, except for when I got my wisdom teeth out. So I didn't smoke for I think like 4 days in that whole span of time for whatever, you know, 16 years or something. And it wasn't that I just would like, oh, you know, I never miss a day. I got to smoke a little bit each day. It was like, no, I smoked all day, every day for the whole fucking time. The heaviest weed I could smoke, the best melt, all whatever was going on, you know? And then when I first started laying back to where I'd go like, okay, I'm not going to smoke right now for this, whatever, you know, I'm not smoking today, or I'm not smoking this morning, or whatever it was, with like easing up a little bit, you know. What I realized was that if you quit, people are like, oh, you haven't smoked in a month, you're going to get so high. No, just quit for 2 days. If you quit smoking for 2 days, when you smoke on that third day, you're going to be pretty much as fucked up as you can get. It's just that as smokers, we smoke so much that we don't even know what it's like to go 6 hours without smoking, you know, because you're like, oh shit, okay, I completed a task, I'm gonna fucking smoke, you know. I I don't know, I completed part of a task, let's roll one, you know. And you just smoke nonstop all the time, so you don't realize, like, people are always like, oh, a nice tolerance break. It's like, you want a tolerance break, just don't smoke tomorrow. Smoke the following day, you're gonna be fucking roped. But when your receptors never clean off for more than 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever, then you know you always have a little bit of it's like you can't determine the character of the high that the weed has as well,
For sure.
because it's more of a on or off. It's binary. It's like you're either high or you're not high. And I'll talk about how people can't get high because they smoke too much, really. And they'll be like, I smoke OG, it gets me high every time. I'm like, yeah, but quit smoking for a few days and then smoke OG, and you'll remember what really high is. because people think like going from being like this to being like this. It's
Right.
like, now I'm high. Like, yeah, now you're high, but you're still going to be fine to go do all your daily tasks. But go ahead and skip 2 days and then smoke some weed you've never smoked before that's truly, really in the highest potency of any kind of weed. And now go try to go fucking pay your taxes at the county, or, you know, get pulled over and talk to a cop, or things that actually make you realize how fucking high you are. And it's going to be a whole different ball game. You're like, oh, fuck, this is a potent fucking drug, you know?
I actually recently, because I do smoke so much in the mornings, you know, smoking all this root beer stuff that I get to the garden store or whatever, and I'm just like dumb. And you know, I'm not usually one to go, oh, I'm sorry, I'm high. Like, I just don't, I don't really mess with that. But I'm sorry, I'm really high. I need a minute here.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to go ahead?
Yeah. And no matter how much weed you smoke, even if you smoke finger hash for breakfast and you smoke fucking it for the rest of the day and you fucking just high, you know, it never stops doing a lot of shit to you. People who are ridiculously fucking strung out on whatever it is, whether it's heroin or alcohol or whatever it is, when you're just doing so much of it, it's not like no one ever says, damn, dude's fucking higher than fucking shit. Like, yes, you are, but not really in a way where you can judge the character of a high very well. That's what I always mean when I tell people they don't know how high they're getting. It's like, it's really hard to be like, that's like, I know like Bodie and Caleb from CSI, they tend to smoke like they're like evening smokers, and they try the new weed of the day that day. And then they try to figure out like, okay, this is what this one does. And by doing that, you're really able to break down the finer nuances of the high versus like when we smoke nonstop, hella heavy, it's always just like, it's like, yeah, you're high. I'm not saying you're not high. It's just not the same as when like you go on vacation and you can't get weed for a day. And then you get weed and you smoke it when you're out of your element, and it's different weed than you're used to. And you're like, fuck, I gotta catch my breath. Like, and you know, everybody will act like that shit don't happen to you, but it's just because you don't fucking, you know, and people's character's different. I'm naturally a little bit anxious and fucking weird and shit. So like, of course, maybe it happens a little more to me, but I do the most gnarly of fucking smokers I've seen fucking, you know, hit the deck, taking a fucking big Keef bong hit or doing whatever the fuck it is that really gets you to that next level where it's like, that is the fucking, that's high right there, you know? And I can't do it if I'm following high after high after high after high. I can never get there.
Yeah.
But if I can just get through a day of work and not smoke until the afternoon, then I'll be like, fuck, I'm high, you know? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just takes skipping the morning, you know? But when I was a smoker, that's not how I smoked. Like, that's why I say I'm not a smoker anymore. I don't really smoke. What does that mean? I still smoke more than everybody who shops at the fucking dispensary. I still smoke a lot of weed. Like, I still fucking go, like, oh, you roll a joint, roll another joint, roll another joint. I went to drop my kid off at a birthday party, and the people there like, hey, we're going to do a hit. You want to hit? Like, you go in, fucking hit the fucking dab of fucking gnarly ass rosin and shit. I'm like, yes. I mean, but that ain't smoking to me. That's just like taking a hit, taking a butt, smoking a joint. Like, you know, so that's why I don't say that I'm like a real smoker, because like when you're a real smoker, you fucking smoke for breakfast.
Well, and it's, I mean, your point is really valid. You know, it's for me as a breeder, it is a disservice for how much I do smoke in some ways, but it's in some ways it's also a service. Like, and so I ended up just got to go with where I'm at, you know, in the moment in my life, and use those tools the best that I can to decipher through the thing, you know.
Well, and there's also a thing too, like for me, if I wasn't already really familiar with these things and these gene pools and able to judge them and able to have the weed to smoke that I know, like the clone, that's grown well to be able to like go, okay, how's that make me feel? How's this make me feel? And be able to judge it against itself, then I would be like, no, like if you've never been completely immersed in being fucking way too high all the time, then you don't really, I feel like, have the ground to stand on to say that you know what you're breeding is good fucking dope. It's just that I have this background with it to the point where I'm like, all right, I know what this is. I know when I smoke this, how this makes me feel, and I can judge it against this, how this makes me feel. You know what I mean? So like I can smoke some lime that I already know which lime it is and smoke it and be used to it and get this high. And then I can smoke this other lime clone that I have now and go, okay, how is that relative to this other one? But first of all, I had to know that when I was a completely stoned to the bone 24/7, that the lime is good weed. Because if I was just starting from only being right now, where I only like smoke at night, I only smoke socially, I only smoke a day to work, but I don't like smoke like nonstop. I just like, I get high all the time, but I don't just like, it's not as much. I'm not just, I used to just be trying to be like, fucking chasing the dragon. Can I get fucking higher? Can I get higher? And it's like, no, the answer is no. That's not how you get higher. The way you get higher is by smoking less, right? So I was like, that's where I picked all my favorites when I was in this like completely. So I know that they work because they got me high even when I was smoking way too much. They still get me high. The best weeds, they get you high no matter what. You never don't get high from them. If you can smoke it, smoke it, smoke it, and after a while you don't get high, that ain't weed. Real weed gets you high no matter what. It's just that you don't get to see the character of it as well when you're doing that all the time. You just know like, I really like it. I really, for some reason, I really like this root beer. Really good. And every time I smoke it, even if I have a huge tolerance, I get that immediate bump to the head where it's like, whew, I get a rush, a weed rush. That's what I want. I want weed that's so potent that when I first smoke it, it comes on really heavy and immediate, and I know it's happening. Those tend to be my favorites. There's some that are creepers that are cool, but I usually want that. And that is something that happens no matter how much you smoke. But after that point, it's very hard to tell. Is it making me less depressed? Is it making me happy? Did it make me laugh? I like don't really get when I smoke all the time, I don't get the weed giggles that don't make sense. I'll laugh at shit. I'll have a great time. I'll be stoned, have stoner conversations and have all that shit. But when your tolerance lays back a little bit, you'll smoke some weed and you'll see something and you know it ain't that funny, but it's fucking funny, dude. I remember trying to read a book to my kid, and I had eaten a little bit of mushrooms and a little bit of edibles. Not a lot. I think it was maybe 25 milligrams and like I don't know, a 0.2 of shrooms or something. Microdose, right? Shouldn't even be that high. And I'm sitting there, but I didn't have a lot of weed tolerance. And I'm trying to read this book, and the book is about trees. And it's all innuendo, and I cannot stop hearing it. Everything is like, the tree grows up and the bark swells and then the seed and everything I'm reading, I'm going, this is all boner jokes, bro. I can't fucking stop fucking laughing. And I could not stop laughing, and I'm laughing so hard that the whole family's laughing, and they know why I'm laughing because the fact that I'm laughing makes them all stand out. And then I try to read the next line and I'm just still laughing even harder. And now as I read the next line, they know that how I'm hearing it is innuendos. So as they read the next line, as I read the next line and they hear it, they know exactly what the fuck I'm laughing at. And now we're all laughing at it because we can't hear anything else. But the whole thing came from the weed thing. And had I had like a huge tolerance to weed, I would have just been reading a fucking book, hella stone, going, yeah, blah, 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 the bark, fucking rings and whatever it is. But because my tolerance was a little lower, the edibles were giving me that uncontrollable fucking weed giggle, you know? And like, yeah, a little bit of shrooms also gives you the giggles too,
Sure.
but it wasn't really, that wasn't the feeling, you know? It wasn't the shroom giggles, which are different. It was the weed giggles. And I was just like, fuck, this is so fun. Like, it's such a fun drug when you can really feel the brightest character of it and not just the medicine of being, you know, because I was, you know, always the, you know, the weed's always been good like that for me in general. They can make me feel better than normal, more sober than normal, honestly. But that's the
Totally.
problem for me socially, is that I go places and all of a sudden now I'm like, fuck, I like need that little veil over my personality so that when I go places I can be social and shit. Because I'll smoke weed and I'll be like, damn, there's all this shit going on. Like everything's too clear. I'm just like too fucking laser focused and shit with the weed, and I'm like, oh shit. But you know, not if I was chilling with you, or you know, but
Right,
like, yeah,
right.
go to, you know, the regen conferences. I'm like, oh dude, I ate shrooms at the regen conference. I was fine. You know what I mean? But I do go to some of the bigger events or just general, like just general parties, especially when it's a real mixed crowd and not everybody's like there for weed or whatever it is. And then I get really high and I just am like not that comfortable with those things.
Yeah.
So, you know, you feel like, yeah, you don't smoke, but you know, I just I don't like to smoke like that anymore. I just don't like to, like you said, going to the store. I just really don't. I've never liked to go to the store when I'm super baked. I don't really like it. I'm
Trying
like,
to pick up
rather,
hardware supplies, dude, with the
yeah.
list that you wrote baked.
How many trips you want to make? Let's put it that way. How many times do you want to go today? Like, I love to have my times now that I'm like fully clear to do certain things. And then I like to get really fucking baked to do other things, you know? And it's just it's one of those weird things, but it's funny because like I never thought I would not smoke quite as much weed. I was always just like, dude, wake up and smoke, like smoke, smoke, smoke. And I don't do it anymore. And I can see the advantages. And like I said, that's not a starting point. You can't be a light smoker and start your breeding program there if you want to have potent dope. You're going to think lots of shit is potent dope, you know? I have to like actually like really sit and go, all right, did this shit really get me? Or am I just tricking myself, you know? It's like if weed is really, really potent, I'll know now, you know, because I'll get really high. But that's the thing is I've always you know, a little bit of weed should get you high even if you're a smoker. It's just
Yeah.
that thing. That's why I say it's a thing of the character of these. There's these fine things you can tell when you got a little bit of not being so deep intolerance, you know. But I don't know why I started with that. It's a rant, but
We were talking about the quality of root beer.
oh, the high, the
Yeah,
type of
yeah.
high.
How it
Yeah,
is.
and that always comes up because I'm always
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's not. I always say it as a disclaimer because if you're smoking like I used to smoke, I can't really say you'll be like, oh, it's such a bright, fun high. I don't think you catch as much of that when you have a really big tolerance. But for people who smoke a little more casually, it's very clear and you will know because you'll be like sitting there and you'll be kind of stuck like, damn, I'm hella high on smoking whatever this thing is that's a little bit more dull, like, you know, runts or whatever it is. Although runts, I kind of like the high on runts. It's a little bit bright for me, but I can be really high on that. And then I can smoke root beer or jarro and it'll just fucking clean slate. Now I'm not high on that weed anymore. I'm high on this weed. And there's not very many things I've ever found over the years like that. They're usually not like that. But when I was smoking nonstop and I would smoke it, mostly what I would notice was that big bump up front where all of a sudden you're just like, okay, yeah, that was what I wanted to do. When I rolled this one, I was going for this right here, you know? And then you don't have to roll some other weed because this weed's good. That's what you want. So, you know.
Boom. Well said.
Yeah, man.
Let's let's take a break there, man, and maybe we'll
Fucking A.
think we'll come back next week and fucking do
Yeah.
another round. Maybe add some other folks to it. You know.
Yeah. We touched on some cool shit, and I ranted about the same old shit to an extent, but always because I know people.
There's some new things that I haven't heard, and we've talked about this a lot. You know, so
Yeah.
it's I appreciate the taking the time, and I think everyone's going to be really interested in hearing. You know.
Yeah, man. I try to think of like how I've told those stories before and have a little bit different, things that I think of that I didn't, like I tried to talk about like what's that Hindu type weed. The first real time I had that kind of weed in my hands was like we had that little gorilla crop. I don't think I'd have ever told the story that way.
Yeah.
So like shows you like why was the nostalgia there. And that's why I say like some people, for them, they might find that one and be like, meh, it's cute, whatever. But for me, it's the story, it's the memory. There's the nostalgia there. It has a lot of power for me in my hunting through.
It's fucking party, bro.
Right on, bro. Fucking A.